Now, as someone who has experience of working in an environment where poor mobile signal was an issue for their organisation and sought the benefit of improved mobile coverage, I'd like to hand over to Simon Reynolds, Head of Voice Services at the University Hospital of Derby and Burton. Simon, can you please talk us through your experience, what your issues were previously as a result of poor mobile signal, and how Selfie mobile coverage solutions helped overcome them for you? Thank
you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. Yes, just for a bit of background, UHDB is a large multi-site trust with over 1,700 inpatient beds, both acute and community-based services spanning 2 counties. We've got over 12,000 staff members, some based within hospital sites, others in the community, and working from home, as we've seen in the last couple of years. And we've currently got over 3,000 mobile devices in use. The vast majority of these are a mix of basic and smartphones. I think 2/3 of those are now probably smartphones, and these are primarily used for general communications within clinical teams and the wider hospital teams. Access to email and Teams, which have become far more prevalent over the last few years, and to assist both community and home working, as well as essential services such as on-call for people who are mobile or off-site. Our main acute site, the Royal Derby Hospital, which is our largest site, is relatively new. It was a PFI on an old hospital, and to assist both community and home working, as well as essential services such as on-call for people who are mobile or off-site. Our main acute site, the Royal Derby Hospital, which is our largest site, is relatively new. It was a PFI on an old hospital site, and at the time that it was designed and built, mobile phones were still relatively rare in use at the hospital, so wouldn't have been taken into account. It wouldn't have been something that was included as part of the essential service or infrastructure considerations when being built. That's clearly changed as the years have moved on, and we have a large number of these devices now used on site. Clinical areas use it to aid communications within their clinical teams, either through traditional calls and texts or through other apps. As I said, it's managed to use and manage on-call services, which are key, and it provides a lot of flexibility for staff who have had to become more agile in the way that they work, certainly during the last few years with the pandemic. In some key areas, the lack of the good mobile coverage made these functions particularly challenging at this site in particular, which acts a bit like a giant Faraday cage. It's 6 stories, lots of metal and concrete, plus all the infrastructure and materials within the site, which proves particularly challenging for penetration of signal, even though externally the signal's not bad in this location. This poor coverage reduces abilities of patients and visitors also to communicate, particularly with family during visits, and it's a negative impact on the overall patient experience while they're with us, which obviously is a key concern for us as a healthcare organisation. The first installation, we've had a number of installations of the Selfie system now. It was first identified for a couple of our areas, key clinical areas, our main X-ray department and our trauma and orthopaedic clinic, which were both on our ground floor, but particularly poor with coverage for mobile signal. And this was causing issues with their clinical teams, and it was encouraging staff to try and access the trust network Wi-Fi, which really isn't something that's generally permitted. They're not considered clinical devices, even though they're essential really for the way that we work now in a healthcare environment. So it was left with few options to provide a solution using existing infrastructure. Mobile users would have to cope with a level of coverage which could fluctuate considerably depending on location, and quite often there'd be very little signal or not enough signal to make use of those devices, and it could widely vary depending on where you are on the site. Those particular locations raised this as a bit of an issue, and we managed to secure funding to get something in, and Selfie was the solution that we've got in those areas. And improvements have been really pretty self-explanatory from a Telecom's perspective. You know, in an area where you don't have signal, suddenly you do. So it's almost an instant benefit for staff and patients alike. As I say, the main X-ray department, trauma and orthopaedic clinic, were the first to go onto the system, and not too long after, we extended that facility to some non-patient facing but central departments, which were located on the same site but in a different area, in an area that might be considered more of a basement, sort of low level area, very poor or to no signal at all. And self-fire was used to allow us to extend coverage in these areas, but not just on our contracted mobile network, because we're contracted to a single provider for mobiles for our trust, but for multiple networks, which alleviated the frustrations of the clinical teams and non-clinical services, providing network access to patients and visitors not previously catered for, if not using the same provider that we were using in those areas. And more recently, we had an installation to extend the self-fire provision further into our adult and children's emergency departments. Both locations have always suffered, particularly from poor mobile coverage. So would have clearly benefited from improvements in these clinical services, which had started to rely more on smartphones. Certainly in recent years, we continue to see the shift from basic phones and fixed telephony to mobile, particularly smartphones and other apps requiring data services. And there was also a concern in these areas with the increasing number of patients and visitors who are connecting to a free Wi-Fi service that's broadcast over our trust infrastructure due to the lack of mobile signal in general. And this would impact capacity for the clinical network using the same infrastructure in these areas. So installing self-fire had a twofold benefit: improving local coverage for staff, but also reducing pressures on the local network by allowing patients and visitors to continue using their own mobile devices, regardless of the network provider they use. So it was a bit of a win-win in those areas, really. And it's been very successful in these areas. Looking forward, I think we're only going to continue to see growth in how these devices are used. Our volume of smart devices increasing consistently as we move forward, and we're going to always need to look at ways of improving this in other areas as services decide to make use of the technology that they're clearly comfortable with in the domestic setting and are now starting to use for more clinical services and general communications within their clinical and non-clinical teams. And would certainly consider self-fire as a solution in other areas if the need arises. And I'd quite happily recommend self-fire as a solution. It seems to work very well and certainly met our needs. So yeah, thank you. Back to you, Colin.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Fantastic.
Just one question for the areas within. I know it's been deployed over a couple of phases. Would you be able to give us an idea, roughly, if you can, Simon, what the number of users, not necessarily simultaneously? I know patients come and go, but even at a staff level, how many users or staff would be in the vicinity of the areas where the coverage solutions are in place at the moment?
We're talking the hundreds for all of these areas. These are high volume areas for staff, and even more so for patients and visitors. You get a lot of agile or transient staff in these areas. It might be porters, it might be nursing staff, it might be staff bringing in notes or bloods or medications, pharmacy staff. So although you've got your core staff in these areas, which can be anything from sort of the tens to the hundreds, depending on the department you're in, it's likely to be much higher at any one given time, just because of the transient way that staff flow through these departments. These are big departments, big clinical services, and extremely busy clinical services, and you can guarantee that the number of patients in those areas is going to be considerably higher at any given time as well. So we're talking lots of bodies in these areas, and pretty much all of the visiting people in these areas will be carrying mobiles or smart devices, and probably quite a large percentage of clinical and non-clinical staff now are likely to be carrying a device, whether it's a trust issued device or their own device. So that all has an impact on capacity.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Pleased to hear that you would look to self-fire to perhaps roll out, extend it to other hospitals or areas within the trust. And I say thank you for taking the time to explain where things have improved or got better within the hospital as a result of indoor or improved indoor connectivity. So as Simon says, whether it be a hospital, a retail store, whether it be a warehouse, a hotel, a care home, or a logistics depot, our Selfie products can be designed to fit with any environment to ensure that any application, any device, or any system that we've talked about works as well inside the building, if not better than it does outside of the building, and these applications don't falter. Crucially, Selfie solutions are Ofcom license exempt to install in the UK and Ireland, which effectively means they're legal to install. They're scalable, flexible to install in almost any indoor environment. They're unconditionally network safe, so they don't cause harm to the mobile networks and their systems. And as is mentioned before, they're cost effective and quick to deploy in the environments they go into. Now, to touch on the products a little further, I'd like to bring in David Cabanis from Nextivity, the Selfie manufacturer.